If we may begin by reciting Surah Al-Fatiha in honor of the Shuhada who were martyred over the month of Muharram in Pakistan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله بارئ الخلائق الأجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء حبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما ولي الله الحجة الصاحب الأمر والزمان روحي وأرواح العالمين له الفداء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. أما بعد، قال مولانا إمام علي بن موسى الرضا صلوات الله وسلامه عليه إن يوم الحسين أقرح جفوننا وأسبل دموعنا صدق الإمام وآمنا به زينوا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Bani Abbas in their entirety came into power on the pretext that they are working towards building a revolution that would take the power away from Bani Umayyah and return it back to the rightful possessors of Khilafah, that being the progeny of Rasulullah. This is why you will see that as Bani Abbas began their revolution, the mass support that they were able to confirm from amongst the masses was on the pretext that they are working to get the Khilafah back to the family of Rasulullah. And for this reason, you will find that a majority of the residents of the Arabian Peninsula joined this mass revolution in overthrowing the Bani Umayyah. However, as Bani Abbas settled into power and achieved the reign of authority, this love for power and the intoxication of greed got them to a situation where they began to oppose, persecute, and assassinate those very powers and those very individuals that helped them get into power in the first place. Majority of these people being the Alawids or the Sadat from the lineage of Imam al-Hassan, who had spent their lives saving up wealth in order to amass capital and weapons so as to depose this tyranny of Bani Umayyah, this kingdom that was set forth by Bani Umayyah. Hassani Sadat, who had spent their lives and had given their blood in overthrowing this tyranny, themselves became the subject of persecution by Bani Abbas, even though Bani Abbas used them in fighting in the front lines against the Umayyad powers. And the crimes that Bani Abbas created or committed against the Sadat, there is no other power that came into Islam and professed Khilafah and at the same time oppressed the family of Ahlul Bayt like the way Bani Abbas did. Yes, Bani Umayyah in their place for what they did to Sayyid al-Shuhada. But Bani Abbas were responsible for the assassination and the killings from Imam al-Baqir all the way to our 11th Imam al-Askari. And in addition to that, the Sadat that were killed, one of the Abbasid Khalifas, upon his death, historians mention that they found a treasure trove or a treasure chest in his room. When they opened it, they found 1,000 heads of the Sadat of Ali Muhammad. Men and children, 1,000, one event that we are aware of. But to commit a crime, to be involved in murder is one thing. But then to mutilate and decapitate bodies and keep these severed limbs or heads as tokens or keep them as prizes is the peak of jahala. And we have said this over and over again. And when you look into these clips on the internet and you see what is happening in Syria, and you see how heads are severed from the body and paraded in the streets, know that these are children and followers of Bani Abbas, Bani Umayyah. And they committed in the name of Islam, as we said yesterday. The city of Baghdad in itself, as Harun al-Abbasi was building the city of Baghdad, you look into the history of this city, the walls or the brick walls or the cement walls that were constructed such that they may form a boundary of the city. Sadat from the lineage of Imam Hassan were buried alive between the brick walls. How many thousands of them were suffocated together with their children between these walls? For yes, Bani Abbas came into power using the pretext and using the banner of Ali Muhammad, but created the greatest or performed the greatest crimes against humanity using this slogan. And this here is a point of ta'ammul, and a point of contemplation. Within our social structures, political structures, religious structures, even now in the 21st century, how many are those that have come and have established institutions claiming that they are serving Ali Muhammad, but they trample the rights of Ali Muhammad themselves? History repeats itself. And like every tyrant, the father of Ma'mun, Harun al-Abbasi, they call him Harun al-Rashid, which is a mistake because he was not Rashid by any means. Harun al-Abbasi, like any other tyrant, one of the greatest crimes that he created or performed is that he openly showed his animosity towards Sayyid al-Shuhada and against the Zawar of Imam Hussein. The first Abbasi Khalif to go and destroy the shrine of Sayyid al-Shuhada was Harun al-Abbasi, the father of Ma'mun. It was during his reign when he saw that the number of the people that flocked towards Karbala from every direction of the Islamic empire, he went towards Karbala, ordered his militia to go and level down and destroy the Qubba, or destroy a part of the Dhari, that structure that was put over the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada. In fact, right next to the grave of Imam al-Hussein, for all of you who have been there, you have seen that with the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada, there is an extension. That extension marks the grave of Ali al-Akbar because he was buried at the feet of Sayyid al-Shuhada. At this place, there was a palm tree that used to grow. It was known as the Sidra. And you will see perhaps out of this Sidra, one of the doors entering into the Haram of Imam Hussein is named after this Babu Sidra. The historians tell us that Harun al-Abbasi ordered for this palm tree whose roots were growing right next from the qabr of Sayyid al-Shuhada to be cut down. Because this tree in itself, because of its proximity, where it sprouted out from, the fact that it was buried or it was grown next to the body of the grandson of Rasulullah, this tree was a form of shafa'ah for the Zawar of Imam al-Hussein. In that they would come and they would touch the bark of the tree, or they would take from the leaves of the tree and they would be cured from their sickness. In fact, the tree in itself became a testimony to the miracle of Sayyid al-Shuhada. The tree in itself and the barakah that came out from this tree became a source of tabligh, because you would have Zawar coming from the furthest points of the Islamic empire, from the African continent. They would come perform the Zyara of Sayyid al-Shuhada, take one leaf from this tree, take it back to their village, distribute it amongst the people who are sick. They would get cured, and when they would find out this is a barakah attributed to Sayyid al-Shuhada, they would come to Imam Hussein, because the people would start to think, if a tree that grows next to Imam Hussein can have so much barakah, then what about Imam Hussein himself? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the enemies of Sayyid al-Shuhada are enemies who understood the strength and the power of the Zyara, which is why they stopped the people. They understood that visitation of Sayyid al-Shuhada is that form of ibadah. In fact, the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada is that sole eternal means of inspiration for any free man who wishes to break himself from the shackles of corruption and obedience to a tyrant. There is no other source of inspiration as powerful as Sayyid al-Shuhada. The people recognized this, which is why they worked very hard to cut off the people's link from Imam Hussein. But only the Zawar of Imam Hussein can describe to you that electric emotion and how the blood flows within their veins with heat when they look at the golden kubba of Hussein and Al-Abbas. None of us can picture that. You need to feel that and ask the Zawar what goes through their minds and what goes through the hearts when they see this golden dome that rules over the skylines of Karbala. Generation after generation. Which is why the poem or the poet describes this situation. And he says, we walk for hundreds of kilometers and we suffer the freezing nights. Under the freezing nights, we walk during the day and bear the scorching heat of the deserts until we come to the place Bayn al-Haramain. And then at one time I look at the Haram and the Kubba of Al-Abbas. I remember how his hands were severed. And then at the other time I look at the Kubba of Al-Hussein and I remember how his body was trampled under the horses. When I think about this, I begin to lament, and my grief is such that I hope the Imam will cast a glance from me while he is sitting at the very top of the arsh. At this point, my emotions overcome me and I begin to lament and weep and beat my face and my cheeks out of grief. The world looks at me when I lament and hit my face and chest and tell me what a lunatic he is. The poet says, "Oh, Mr. Intellect, have you ever seen a person who has fallen in love and at the same time remained sane?" He says, "Oh, Mr. Intellect, it is better for me to be deemed a lunatic and have fallen in love than to not have fallen in love with Hussein whatsoever. Hubbul Hussein ajannani. The love of Hussein has made me crazy bad. I lose my rationale." And the poet replies back, another poet replies back, says, "Bil'aks, Jununi lil Hussein dalil ala akli." My insanity for Hussein is proof of my intellect. It is only a person who understands the reality of Imamah that he will go crazy over the Masaib of Imam. Junoon. Look today in the news. One of the tribes from the outskirts of Iraq, the outskirts of probably Najaf around Nasiriyah, the tribe of Bani Maysura. They held a Majlis Fatiha today for somebody from their tribe, 28, 29-year-old person who had gone for the ziyarah of Sayyid al-Shuhada, and when he returned back outside, I think this was around Nasiriyah, because the people of Iraq and around Nasiriyah, what they do is they perform the ziyarah of Arba'in before the day of Arba'in. Perhaps even 7 or 8 days before. And this is such that they may give a chance to the other people who are coming from outside of Iraq to actually be in Karbala during Arba'in. For 10, 12 days before he has gone, he has performed the Zyara. On his way back home, the Ahl al-Nawasib and the Jahils from the Wahhabiyya came and they caused an explosion. Haram, this Shab, passed away in this explosion. Suicide bomber. Ba'ad, his body was blown into pieces. Today, his tribe held a Majlis Fatiha for him. And they come to the mother, because the father has passed away, and it's probably not a far-fetched conclusion that he was killed by the time of Saddam. They come to his mother and they ask his mother, "Anta, you are the mother of this Shaheed. What emotions run through you?" Look at their belief and look at their love for Imam Hussein. Their Majlis Fatiha, even they delayed until after Arba'in. They say, why? He said, we didn't want to hold a Majlis Fatiha during the days of Arba'in because we might oblige our neighbors to come to the Fatiha of our son and this way get delayed in their Zyara for Hussein. Iman, Aqaid. For they asked this lady, what goes through your mind? This great crime has taken place and you have lost your son. Do you know what this lady said on state TV? She said to him, this is a source of pride for me, that when I will go to Imam Hussein in Karbala the next time, I will tell to him, Hussein, I gave my son for you. Make sure your mother does shafa'ah for me. This person has left brothers behind, he's left sisters behind, he has left young children behind. They asked them, children, will you go to Karbala? They said, of course we have to go to Imam Hussein. How is our life more valuable than the life of Imam al-Hussein? Hubbul Hussein ajannani. The love of Hussein has made us crazy, and this is what our enemies are scared of. They are scared that there will be a generation of Shi'as and the Mawali who care about nothing but loyalty towards their Imam. And when 313 of these top-notch caliber companions appear, our 12th Imam reappears. Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. Returning back to our conversation in regards to our 8th Imam. Harun al-Rashid or Harun al-Abbasi had two sons, Ma'mun and Amin. Harun had decided on his deathbed that as he passes away, he will leave the Khilafah for his son Amin. And then after Amin, the next person in line, yani the crown prince, will be the other brother Ma'mun. And Amin was set in Baghdad, Ma'mun was set in Khurasan. Between these two people in Khurasan and Baghdad, they were to rule the entire Islamic empire around them. Harun died. He's buried in Khurasan. History narrates that 18 days later, Amin deposed his brother Ma'mun and appointed his own son Musa, whom he had named Musa an-Natiq, as the crown prince after him. Look at how the evil of the dunya can separate two brothers from each other. It's love for dunya. And the traditions that speak about cleansing the heart is not only such that a person may protect his akhirah, but such that he may protect his honor and his dignity and the dignity of his family in the dunya. Like the way we said yesterday, hukum shara'i, many times there are benefits for it in the dunya as well as in the akhirah. To cleanse your nafs from love for this dunya will protect yourself and ensure that you do not fall down to the level of an animal. These two brothers fought over the dunya. Each one raised an army, and between this family feud, the Muslim Ummah lost thousands and thousands of lives. Because the narrations tell us that this war between Ma'mun and Amin lasted for 4 years. Within these 4 years, Baghdad city in its entirety was ruined. Over 150,000 people within Baghdad lost their lives. And when the armies of Ma'mun would come in, they would not spare the honor of the women as well. But you can understand from this sentence what the consequence must have been. And the number of illegitimate children, Ajallakumullah, that was born after that. All in the name of fighting for Khilafah. This trend that happened in Islam, where people felt that they have the reason and they are justified to use the sword and shed blood in order to establish Khilafah, in order to establish the rule of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a direct consequence of them abandoning the reason or abandoning the rule and the last command of Rasulullah. That was the appointment of Amirul Mu'mineen. If blood was spilt in Islam for the very first time over a power struggle, it was during the battle or during the event of Saqifa in itself. Ahlul Bayt and the madhab of Ahlul Bayt has never warranted violence in seeking your own rights. Abadan. And this, as we have said numerous times over the year, is a source of pride for us. Madhab of Al Muhammad, us Shias need to hold our heads high, especially here in the West, because we are the only madhab that subscribes to a school of non-violence. And this is what each and every Imam proved through their madhab. For which Islam do these people follow? The traditions tell us the siege around Amin tightened until he was captured, killed, he was beheaded, and the head of Amin was taken back to the palace in Khorasan and presented in front of his brother. You would think that because they shared, even though they had different mothers, they were from the same father. Leave aside the principles of Sila Raham, you think he would have an ounce of mercy, in that even if he had his brother killed, he would not have his head severed. Not only did they sever his head, not only did he express happiness upon sight of his brother's severed head, but they hung it on the walls of the palace in Khorasan such that the rest of the people can see. And let this be a lesson for anyone who tries to fight Ma'mun for Khilafah. How does a person get to this level such that even this iota of raham or mercy inside him is taken away from him? This is when his line of thinking and his faculty of judgment is clouded by hubbud dunya. Bad, finished. Dirham, dollar signs, even if it means the severed head of my brother. For in this way, Ma'mun attained the range of authority over the Islamic Ummah. And despite having apparently established his hukuma, he had extreme difficulty in ensuring the support of the masses in themselves. Why? Because as you know, the history of Bani Abbas, like the way we said, they came into power on the basis that they want to return authority to Ali Muhammad. They have a history of oppressing the Ali Muhammad. And then over here you have Ma'mun who has just killed his brother Amin. How does a person like Ma'mun gain legitimacy from the people? Yes, he might have military dominance over them, but how does he command that respect from him? Ma'mun was in a political turmoil in that he had not got to a position where he would command the respect of the citizens within the Islamic Ummah. So what did Ma'mun do? He put together a scheme where he would involve Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, as a part of the government. And you know, this is a tactic that repeats itself in history many times. Whenever you have a fasiq, whenever you have a tyrant in a position of leadership or in a position that is undeserving, one of the best ways to get credibility is to get an alim or to get a maulana such that the amama stamps and endorses all his fake decisions. True or not? True or not? It's an Abbasi way of thinking. This is what Ma'mun did. If I can get this imam who is respected amongst the Alawis, this person whom a certain sect reveres and takes as a leader of the madhab, if I align him and bring him into the fold of my government, I may gain legitimacy and credibility amongst the people, which is why he included Imam al-Ridha within the realm of his government. Otherwise, what you read from Orientalists, that Ma'mun had this affiliation and he had this mercy towards the Imam, and he tried to consolidate between the differences of the Abbasids and the Alawids. Alawids meaning the Sadat of Ali Muhammad. This is all a wrong interpretation and a very surface interpretation of history, a very shallow interpretation of history. Because Shaykh Abbas Qumi in Muntaha al-Amal mentions this point, that when Ma'mun approached Imam al-Ridha, Imam Ridha was still in Medina, and he came to the Imam at the beginning. Look at the politics of Ma'mun. He comes to our 8th Imam and he says to him, Yabna Rasulallah, I have realized that you are more educated than I am, and you are more pious than I am, and you are more well versed in the Quran than I am, and that this khilafah, you are more deserving to hold it than I am. For at this point in time, Yabna Rasulullah, I abdicate my authority and I present this khilafah to you. The Imam rejected this. And a lot of the people who claimed to be Shias around the circle of Imam al-Ridha heavily criticized the Imam for not taking this opportunity. They said, Ya Imam, the last time the Shias had an authority or had a government, somebody at the head of the government was Amirul Mu'mineen. Hundreds of years have passed, we have been oppressed. Now you have a region, now you have been presented the Khilafah in your hands to rule, and you reject this offer. You yourself are becoming a cause for the oppression of the Shias. Wal-ayadu billah. Ma'soom Imam's judgment is infallible. But the Imam has knowledge of the ghaib. The Imam's insight is much greater than our insight. And any person who contemplates over this will be able to discover the ploy of Ma'mun. Very simply, a person who has spent 4 years shedding havoc in the Islamic territory, who has just beheaded his brother such that he can give Khilafah, will give the Khilafah. No doubt there is something within the plan, like the way they say, Dal mein kuch kala hai. For Imam Ridha was fully aware of this, and he rejected the offer. And the first way in which he rejected the offer, when Ma'mun came to him, Ma'mun, as we said, abdicated his right, and he said to the Imam, you are more deserving of this than I am. For Imam al-Ridha answered back to him with a masterpiece of an answer. He says to him, إذا كانت هذه الخلافة لك فلا يجوز لك أن تخلع لباسا ألبسكه الله. He says, if this khilafah is your right that was granted to you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you have no right to abdicate an authority that has been granted by Allah. If Allah has put this position on you, you cannot defer it on anybody else. Rasulullah was ordained with Nabuwah, but this doesn't mean because he cannot handle Risala, for example, that he defers this responsibility to somebody else. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has selected a person, then there is no right for him to abdicate his position from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And similarly, Imam al-Ridha said to him, وَإِن كَانَ لَيْسَ لَكَ مِنْ هَذِهِ الْخِلَافَةِ فَلَا يَجُوزُ لَكَ أن تعطيني or أن تعطيني ما ليس لك. He says, and if this khilafah does not belong to you, then it is not your right to give me something that does not belong to you in the first place. For Ma'mun was stuck. He had no answer to reply back. The historians tell us that he went back to Khurasan and the Imam continued to live within Medina. And Ma'mun continued to pressure the Imam and went down a step in that, "Oh Imam, Yabna Rasulullah, if you are not willing to take the Khilafah in its entirety, then at the very minimum accept to be the crown prince, yani to be the next person in authority after me." Even this Imam Rida refused. And we have numerous traditions that state that Ma'mun would send delegation after delegation to Medina to try and convince the Imam, until finally Ma'mun threatened our 8th Imam in that if he does not accept the heir apparency, yani to be the crown prince after Ma'mun at an official publicized level, he will have the Imam beheaded. For the traditions tell us very clearly, Imam Rida announced that I am accepting this position out of coercion. There is no free will and there is no choice. But over here, a person may ask a question, the terms of an ishkal. Why would the Imam agree to take this heir apparency and accept to be a party to a tyrant? Because Ma'mun is looking for legitimacy in his government, whether he forces the Imam or doesn't force the Imam. The general public, once they see that Imam Rida has been appointed as the heir apparent, they will take the legitimacy of the government at face value. Why does the Imam agree to this? Is the Imam scared of death? Wal'ayadu billah? Because they threatened him with death. Never, abadan, our Imam and any one of our Imams are never scared of death. But the maslihah of Islam and the maslihah of Shi'ism at that point in time was for the Imam to preserve his life rather than sacrifice his life. During the time of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the requirement was different. The maslihah of the madhab entailed the Imam should sacrifice his life. But for Imam Rida, it was different. The services that he would be able to provide towards the madhab would be greater through preservation of his life and accepting this apparent authority, even if it was out of coercion. How? From a number of perspectives. Number one, when Imam al-Rida accepted this authority, he was able to ensure that the Sadat from the children of Imam al-Hassan and from his cousins, his other brothers and the cousins from the children of Imam al-Qadim and Imam al-Sadiq, their lives would be spared. Because so long as the Imam is in a seat of authority, he would be able to ensure that these counter-revolutions that happen or these other Alawids who stand against Ma'mun would not be killed. The Imam would become a wasila towards ensuring the rights of the Sadat of Ali Muhammad. As you know, Bani Abbas had persecuted them heavily to the extent that they did not have the right to conduct business. But if they don't have the right to conduct business, then how do they gain their livelihoods? Khums has become a tool through which the government gains wealth, the disbursement of the khums. The Bani Abbas did not care whether there is a Sahim Imam or a Sahim Sadat. In fact, they considered themselves from the Sadat. And those children who were from the Alawites or from the Hassanis didn't receive a penny from this. For does a person contemplate over the difficulties that the children of Ahlul Bayt went through over history, even if they were not from the Ma'soom? Imam Rida stood up as a wasila to protect their lives and to give them a fair chance in improving their standard of living. This was number one. Number two, Imam Rida himself, by accepting this position, had enforced a number of conditions through which he was able to disclose or publicize or expose the hypocrisy of Ma'mun. Because the story of Ma'mun, which he sells to the public, is that Imam Rida has willfully accepted to be my heir apparent, which means my government now has religious credibility from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever we do, however we act, Nobody can criticize us. Why? Because the Ma'soom Imam has endorsed our government, and his presence within the government as the heir apparent is a sign of this. Correct? Look at how Imam Rida exposes him. Because when he accepted this heir apparency, he put down a number of conditions. One of these conditions is that Imam Rida himself would not be directly involved or indirectly with the judicial system. That means he was not involved with the judges or the dispensing of justice. Number two, Imam Rida would not be involved in the appointment or in the dismissal of governors. Number three, the Imam would not be involved in any sort of fiscal policy. Number four, the Imam would not be involved in any type of domestic reform. Number five, the Imam would not be involved in any other religious affairs tied to the government. Tayyib, what is the job of Imam Rida? You are the crown prince. You are not involved in the judiciary. You don't want to be part of the religion. You don't want to be part of looking over the government. You don't want a part in appointing or dismissing the governors. What is your job? What is your job? For the person who contemplates over this, he understands that the Imam is distancing himself from the actions of the government, and this position that has been given to him is nothing but a puppet position. And this is how the people discovered that the presence of Imam Rida within the government is nothing but a plot by Ma'amun, and they distanced themselves and refused to give that religious credibility to the government which it sought out for. This is from the wisdom of Imam Rida. Just like the way the Imam acted with wisdom, he expected the Shias to work and read the political situation with wisdom as well. This wisdom is a natija, or comes about through two things: ilm and tazkiyatun nafs. Side by side. If you have ilm without tazkiyatun nafs, you become a destructive force within the ummah. Because this knowledge becomes a reason for arrogance. And when a person is arrogant, Shaitan was thrown out of Jannah because of arrogance. It is narrated in Al-Kafi that Shaitan, Iblis himself, had worshipped Allah for 6,000 years prior to his disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 6,000 years. Our sixth Imam says that within these 6,000 years, one type of amal that Shaitan did, one type of amal that Iblis did, is that he recited the 2 rak'ah salah. From this 2 rak'ah salah, if the ruku' of Iblis from this 2 rak'ah salah was to be calculated and weighed, it would overweigh the entire ibadah of the whole of mankind. And I'll put forward for you a very awkward statement. Then where is our ibadah compared to the ibadah of Iblis? And despite this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala expelled Iblis from Jannah. Why? Because he had inside his heart takabbur. خَلَقْتَهُ مِن تِينٍ وَخَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ. Allah, takabbur, you have created me from fire and you have created him from clay. You want fire to bow down in front of clay? Impossible. The traditions tell us Iblis told Allah, I will worship you and perform sajda in front of you for another 6,000 years, but I will not do sajda to Adam. Allah said, take your ibadah for yourself, and outside of my Jannah shall you go. For a person who has such a background in his worship is expelled from heaven for takabbur, then what about people like myself and yourself? one of the key areas of conflict management and management of a community based on religion is that there should be the eradication of arrogance in its entirety. Because so long as a person is humble, there is a chance that he will learn from others to improve himself and improve the community around him. There is majal, there is space for a synergy to grow if arrogance is eliminated. And this in itself is a topic for itself. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. For the Imam exposed Ma'mun in the conditions that he had put forward for his treaty. Another benefit of the Imam is that by him joining the government, even though it was against his will, is that by him participating or being within the proximity of Ma'mun, he was able to show and publicize the superiority of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt over the Imams of all other madhabs. Because another mistake that Orientalists make in their history of Ma'mun is that they say the period of Ma'mun was one in which the intellect flourished. Ajib, how? They say that it was Ma'mun's love for knowledge, that he would bring in philosophers and scholars of mantiq or logic from different parts of the Arabian lands. They would bring in philosophers from India, have their books translated into Arabic, and open up the intellectual field for the people. This in itself is a fallacy, because the philosophy with which those Indians and those Romans came with was a philosophy that put people or threw them into the depths of kufr. These books that they use to try and convince people by using what is apparent to the eye as high-level language and an understanding of Allah which only an elite educated can understand. And when you do this, you become from this special Irfan sect that has a special ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How many of those books of philosophy or these parts of Irfan have a single hadith from Amirul Mu'mineen? Is it possible to understand or even start to think of the essence of Allah without looking at Ahlul Bayt or without using Ahlul Bayt as a medium? Abadan. For these people came in, Ma'mun used the pretext of opening up the intellectual minds and bringing in new material for the people to think. But what had happened is through these books they were disseminating the most dangerous thoughts when it came to Islamic theocracy and ideology. The Mu'tazilites, when they sprout out, they were given a leading hand by Ma'mun to go out and spread their philosophies and to go out and spread their beliefs, countering and diminishing the strength of Islam, which is why you have number of traditions from Imam Rida that talks about issues of qada and qadar. For the Imam and his accepting of this position was one where he could academically refute these thoughts and re-establish the superiority of Ahlul Bayt from a point of view of knowledge. And another benefit of Imam Rida in accepting this position is that once the people thought that this is an Imam who has been endorsed by Ma'mun and the Imam has a certain degree of freedom, the Imam used the power of these tyrants to open up and revive the remembrance of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Because it was Imam Rida, despite being under the watchful eye of Ma'mun, that he established the Majalis Husseini from his house and revived the Sha'air Husseiniya. All the actions that are related and tied with the commemoration of Sayyid al-Shuhada. And the weeping that Imam Rida did over Sayyid al-Shuhada is a weeping that cannot be compared probably to any other Imam with the exception of our 12th. The Imam says, Inna yawm al-Hussein akraha jufunana wa asbala dumu'ana. He says the day of Imam Hussein, yani the weight of the tribulations that fell upon Imam Hussein on the day of Ashura, when I think about this masa'ib and I weep, what happens? Imam Rida says, the heaviness of my weeping and the intensity of my weeping, I have wounded my eyelids. Quruh, if you look into Arabic language, is the breaking of a vessel, which means there is a blood clot on your eyelid due to intense weeping. Look at the extent to which Imam Rida was affected by the masa'ib of his grandfather. Akraha jufunana. He opened up the doors for people to revive the remembrance of Sayyid al-Shuhada inside their houses. These traits that you see, people holding majalis inside their homes within the month of Muharram and Safar, and inshallah these muwaleen and these mu'mineen will continue to host majalis throughout the year for Sayyid al-Shuhada in their houses, throughout the year. These is walking, or these actions are following in the seerah and the footsteps of Imam al-Rida. De'bil says, one of the poets and companions of our 8th Imam, that I came into the house of Imam Rida in one of the days of Muharram, and I saw Imam in an extreme state of grief, his companions sitting around them, the Imam himself dressed in black clothes. He comes to De'bil and he asks him, "Oh De'bil, can you compose for us a poem, a eulogy, like how we recite the Marthia and the Nawha? Can you compose one for us in remembrance of my father, Sayyid al-Shuhada?" They said, the narrations tell us that De'bil stood up and recited this poetry. I will recite for you 4 lines of this masa'ib. But know that when Imam Rida heard this masa'ib, it is narrated in Uyun al-Akhbar that he fainted twice. Out of grief, fainted twice. What did you recite, Ya De'bil? Which words did you use that caused my Imam so much grief? The narrations tell us that De'bil stood up while Imam is sitting. What else did Imam do? Before De'bil began the recitation, he put forward a curtain in the middle of his house and invited the women of his family to come and sit and participate within the aza of Sayyid al-Shuhada, because even the women have a role in commemorating the legacy of Sayyid al-Shuhada. He put forward the curtain. Imam Rida sits at the very front of the majlis. De'bil stands up and begins to recite a poem that put a hole in the heart of our Imam. What does De'bil say? He says, "Afatimu law khilti al-Husayna mujaddalan wa kad mata atshanan bishatt al-furat idhan lalatamti Fatimu wajhahu indahu wa jarat dam'a al-ayn bil-wajanat." De'bil says, if Fatima was there to witness how Hussein was killed thirsty on the ranks of Furat, if Fatima would have seen the mangled body of Sayyid al-Shuhada, Fatima would have hit her face and her tears would have poured down. Ajib, can you imagine Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen, Fatima hitting her face for Hussein? Imam Rida, it is narrated at this point, fainted. I think in this poem for De'bil, and I ask De'bil, when you compose this poem, I wonder if you meant that Fatima would slap her face with 2 hands or with 1 hand. And I think Fatima slapped her face with 1 hand. Do you know why? Because the other hand was on that broken rib when the door was pushed on Fatima. Allah, the traditions narrate that the popularity that Imam al-Ridha had gained, Ma'mun decided to end his life. For one of the nights, Ma'mun called Imam Ridha to his palace. He invited him to a meal and he sat Imam Ridha by his side. The traditions tell us that Ma'mun presented a plate of grapes that was inserted with poison. The tradition tells us that Imam Ridha ate from one of these grapes, and as soon as he ate this grape, he began to feel the effect of the poison in his body. Abu Salt says that I saw the 8th Imam come out from the house of Ma'mun, and the color of his face had changed in that he was extremely pale. He says, Abu Salt says, I followed my Imam to his house, and it is as if the Imam would take 2 steps and then he fell down. Abu Salt says, Ya Sayyidi, what happened to you? This is the effect of the poison that has taken its toll on Imam Ridha. Abu Salt says that the Imam went to his house. He laid himself on the ground, and then Abu Salt says, فَكَانَ يَنْكَلِبِ يَمِينًا وَشِمَالًا. He says that the Imam, when he lied down on the ground, he would turn sometimes to his right and sometimes to his left due to the pain and the heat of the poison in his body. At one time, Imam Ridha tells Abu Salt that the effect of this poison is as if my chest has been stabbed by hundreds of daggers. Allah, Abu Salt is standing by the door of the house of Imam Ridha. He sees that Imam Jawad comes from Medina towards his father. He looks at Imam Ridha in his state. He begins to cry. He kisses the forehead of Imam Ridha. The traditions tell us that it was Imam al-Jawad at a tender age of 8 years that he came and he gave ghusl to his father, and he put the hunut on the 7 places of sajda. He looked at his father for one last time. A 7-year-old child. Have you seen a 7-year-old child give ghusl to his father? They tell that the narrations tell us that Imam Jawad began to cover the coffin or put the coffin around the body of Imam Ridha. At one time, when Imam al-Jawad was about to cover the face of Imam Ridha with the coffin, Imam Jawad burst out into tears crying, Wa Imama, Wa Ghariba. I said to you, Ya Imam Jawad, you call your father Gharib, but at least you are able to give your father a ghusl. At least you are able to give your father a coffin. There was one Gharib, there was one Madhloom in Karbala. For 3 days no one gave him a ghusl. For 3 days no one gave him a coffin. Allah, this part of the Masa'ib for my brothers Zawar of Imam Hussein. You have come back and the memory of Sayyid al-Shuhada is fresh in your minds. I want to take you back to Karbala. I want to bring you into the Sahan of Sayyid al-Shuhada. Zawar al-Hussein, now you are standing in the Sahan. Do you know what that Sahan Husseini is? This was the Katlaga. This was the Maidan. This is where the blood of Ahlul Bayt was shed. I want you to stand over there. You are standing in the Katlaga, and at this point you turn around. You remember very clearly where the Mukhayyam, where the Khaymaga was. No, I want you to picture yourself standing in the Sahan. Behind you is the Khaymaga. Zainab, Kulthum, Imam Sajjad, all of them are standing there. And then you look towards the grave of Sayyid al-Shuhada, the place where there is a red light. They call it the Madhbaha. This is where Shimar sat on the chest of Imam Hussein. Ya Zawar Hussein, I want you to remember this. Imam Hussein was Gharib and Madhloom, because at the place of the Madhbaha, Ibn Ziyad calls 10 people with their horses. He says, bring 5 horses from the east, 5 horses from the west. Ya Zair, you are standing in the middle. Ibn Ziyad tells the horsemen to gallop their horses. You can hear Zainab from the Khaymaga south, Ya Ada Allah. In the middle, the horses are trampling the body of Hussein. Sometimes the body of Imam on the right, sometimes the body of Imam on the left.